To kick off this day, I am so thrilled to have a powerhouse panel this morning. I mean, when we talk about changing for the future and electrifying our future, you know, Shayna said it really well. What we're doing and why we're doing it is to create healthier, sustainable cities. We're not electrifying for the sake of doing so, but really to improve our overall public health and well-being. When we talk about the future, we know our cities are growing, population and employment is booming, and in Ontario alone, you know, we plan to build 1.5 million homes. And so naturally, you know, with e-commerce growing, there is going to be significant growth in the movement of goods in our cities, and being able to do so in a sustainable way matters. The statistic is telling about 75% of Canadians will buy something online this year, and that's going to bring in $1.6 billion of goods and parcels delivered to Canadians each year. So this is why this panel is so important to the discussion. So to kick it off, I want to ask our panelists, number one, we all identify as lifelong learners. So, Rob, let's start with you. What was surprising? What was new, exciting that you learned from yesterday's discussion?
Perhaps it was what wasn't yet surprising, and we did talk about that. And that's where I blurted out this comment that I feel like the Apple guy at an IBM conference. And I was listening to IBM talk about the future of, and all the ways they were going to have to, the things that didn't work, that would create friction that wasn't going to happen. And yet, I have talked to our associates here and said, in the future, we'll actually be in the power business, that we're going to supply and be an important part of the utilities and the grids, and those are the people we need to be spending a lot more time with. That was the biggest thing that came out here, and Chris, I'll give you credit for the one saying that.
Well, naturally, let's go over to Chris then. Do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, when we look at the future of electrification, you know, that relationship with the utilities is the key part. And I think, you know, when we were in the workshop, you know, we had some utility folks there, and obviously they're here today. And I think that two-way outreach is vitally important. I think that's the thing that struck me the most is, you know, as we started this journey, you know, again, this is just our kind of feeling, is that we're the ones kind of reaching out and trying to get out and get in front of it to see it. But I think as we start to plan for, you know, the electrification, the need for power, the need for regions or cities or towns to have appropriate power, we have to be working hand in hand to understand, you know, what their plan is and what our plan is to see what's capable. Because, you know, if a certain utility isn't planning, you know, to have a certain region electrified or have enough power, the likelihood is that we probably won't go there to be able to put our vehicles and our business there. So, you know, that symbiotic relationship, I think is the one thing that struck me yesterday, is that we really need to enhance that and grow that in a fairly rapid pace. Because I think, you know, while, you know, we're ebbing and flowing right now, electrification, you're seeing, you know, people pull back a little bit, and, you know, manufacturers and some people say, well, there's not enough charging out there. You know, I happen to believe it's a bit of a tsunami. We're just waiting right now. The water's receding, but the wave is coming very shortly. And so we have to be prepared for that wave to come.
Okay, and you have the next word.
Definitely, you know, I can resonate with my colleagues here around like the utility. Like, it's very important, like, to make sure we plan ahead. But one thing I think I would like to just go back with is basically, I've been traveling for 3 weeks. Like, I've been part of Truck World conference last week, and now part of, like, I see electric autonomy as being the combination of pretty much all the electric discussions we are having today. Like, I think I really like to be part of conversations at the base, let's say, where people are starting that electrification, understanding the main pain points, and really here seeing that this wave is not here to stop, pretty much. Like, no, it's happening. Like, and we need to find a way to bridge that gap. Like, we need to find a way to, like, the utility conversations, planning ahead will bring that confidence, but we need to do much more than that. Like, we need to bring that confidence on the charging infrastructure, on making sure that, like, the understanding planning is part of, like, also the next steps, like, not only the vehicle. So I think, like, how we take those discussions, very important discussions, we translate that in a very seamless way for basic audience, pretty much, like, and bridge that gap. I think that we're doing that, like, and there's a lot of more work to be done on that as well.
Now we know that change is happening so quickly, and where we started even 10 years ago is not where it's such a different landscape right now. So Rob, I want to go to you because you have come so far, and I would say you're a serial entrepreneur. What got you started on the electrification journey, and where are you today, and where do you see us going in 10 years?
Well, this might sound a little odd, but I would say that pillow talk is very powerful. That's how I got started. And I bought a local same-day courier company in the year 2000, and 100 vehicles in Vancouver. We don't own the vehicles, the drivers own them. And I told my wife, and she said, why did you buy a dirty business? And it came to me, I said, because I can clean it up. And so now I buy dirty companies and clean them up. And I have 2 transportation businesses. And it was, in a way, her knowledge and a bit of an inspiration. And 3 years later, the first hybrids were available. So that we were able to get our drivers out of their $3,000 beaters, terrible pollution, and into brand new $30,000 hybrids. And the innovation wasn't the hybrids, it was getting them into those. And I'll finish by saying Novex Couriers, the name of that company in Vancouver, we're very proud that as of 2020, we have an external group that audits our emissions. We've reduced our emissions by over 59%. Actual emissions down. And now many of our drivers are into electrics as they're available.
That's great. I want to go to you, Gabriela, because 7th Gen has a really unique business model where you offer electrification as a service. Can you tell us a little bit more, and are we going to see more and more businesses like 7th Gen come online?
Yeah, I hope yes, because that is a really important and complex problem to resolve, and I think end-to-end solutions is one of the key aspects where we decided to tackle. So just to give a bit of background also on myself, I like to resolve complex problems. I started with the solar world many years ago, and electrification can be very complex, right? Many different stakeholders, many different parts, and lots of things to crack, and we chose to focus on commercial electrification, which is something that we need to accelerate that. So how we make sure that we accelerate, that we catalyze, we bring more confidence to drivers, fleet managers, executives on the buying on that. This can be happening right now, despite of the technology hurdle. So one way we approach that is pretty much take de-risking the operations from the customers. So if you don't have the way of mobilizing your CapEx, pretty much right now, we convert that CapEx into OpEx, so you don't need to worry about the upfront money you have on. We take on the financing, so there are lots of terms around what is trucks as a service, charging as a service, EV as a service. The way we understand is on the financing side. This unlocking the finance is the key component for owner-operators, for depot fleets owners that want to start. A few other clients also that they benefit from that is depot, basically other companies, enterprise companies that they don't want to they're skeptical about starting off the electrification. They don't know where to start. So just ensuring that they have that pilot project running, the monthly costs, the service is done, learning as we go is how we pretty much sell that price point. And lastly, I think it's the competitive advantage on the price, because we see a lot of customers from our end, they're paying only on gasoline around $1,200 per month, just on gasoline. So when you see the monthly cost that they're going to be paying for a system, for a monthly cost on the financing side, they're going to be paying for $1,000, and pretty much the cost of the energy will be offset by the carbon credits, part of our offer as well. So I think this is a huge benefit to unlock that the excuses that say, oh, I cannot start right now. No, you can. There is a technology available. We can take care of this for you, and you can learn with us as well as you learn. So I think that is one of the important points as well on the turnkey solutions.
Chris, I want to go to you next. I mean, for delivery companies, similar to UPS, there's so many considerations and factors when you're making the switch to a different vehicle technology, and that's not just true for electrification. In your experience, of course, you get the gains from reducing greenhouse gas emissions and that environmental air pollution benefit, but what have you seen in terms of co-benefits? How have you kind of been surprised at what operational benefits you can get from making the switch?
Well, I think first and foremost, you talk about, the people change and the people adoption is one of the things that we've seen. So from our drivers' perspective, and even in some of our communities where we're operating right now, we have our drivers who will tell us they now much more enjoy the driving experience in an electric vehicle. They like the fact that it's not polluting. The actual driving experience itself in the vehicle with the lower center of gravity, less noise, for that being their office for 8 hours a day, it's a much more enjoyable experience. They're not as tired at the end of the day. And then when they're out in the community, we have a lot of our drivers now who get stopped by people and say, hey, is that an electric vehicle? Is that what's it like? What do you I didn't know you had these. And they're kind of walking billboards. And so we get that incremental benefit in the community and with our engagement with our staff who want to be a part of it. And we're hearing more and more now from our operations across the board. Now that they've seen some of the vehicles, we just recently had an operations summit last week. We brought many of our electric vehicles, including our e-bikes and LSVs. And the interest and the wanting to get there quicker is significant within the operations. And so in and around the whole concept of how do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, it's becoming more and more prevalent within our organization. And people are looking at more and more ways to do it. So whether it's changing out our light bulbs, whether it's ensuring we're sorting our garbage properly, looking to reduce our overall energy consumption, the impact in terms of the overall organization to look at multiple ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is significant within the organization.
Yeah, that's certainly been the case for UPS. I mean, we're just early in our journey, bringing 10 new electric vehicles online in our Caledon hub in Ontario, 10 going to BC very shortly, and another cluster of vehicles coming to Quebec. And so I think what we'll find also in our journey is kind of that positive kind of memory and experience. But Rob, with 2 transportation companies under your belt, I'm sure you have some experiences there.
Well, I raised my hand because I did want to underscore what you both said, and I call these the unanticipated benefits. When we started getting hybrids or electrics, as you do, we didn't plan or think about the pride of the employees, the happiness, the health of we didn't think those things. Our driver turnover in the industry is about 30%. Ours is 5 to 7%. You can measure that. The accountant can measure the savings in hiring, but this pride, this happiness, that's running a better business. If you can design that into your business by having clean products, and electric vehicles are what I call conspicuous sustainability. This is a LEED Platinum building, one of the highest, the greenest buildings that ratings you can get. You probably didn't know that unless you saw the sign. When you're in or behind or around an electric vehicle, it brings smiles, thumbs up, all kinds of things. And I really did want to underscore that for people who are running and in businesses. It's another very real reason to do this.
That's absolutely true. Gabriela, I want to talk to you about procurement because I think you have an interesting vantage point around understanding the tipping point where fleets, are trialing electric vehicles. At UPS, I mean, I would say we're still in the piloting phase where we're not quite committed to one technology, one vendor. We're testing it all. When it comes to your customers, is there a natural tipping point where you have to change the procurement strategy?
Yeah, I think overall procurement, and I mean, I have like the right people here in the room also to talk about it, how to buy it. Like, but what I'm experiencing is that the biggest mistake that you can make, like when you're procuring, is assuming that you're procuring as your ICE vehicles, pretty much. So if you're assuming that your operations are going to run similar to ICE, you're making a big first step mistake like on there, because like your electric vehicles will change the way that you operate, like in a positive approach as well. Like, so when we're talking about the change, like we're talking about the optimization of facilities. We're talking about now building your depots capable. So we're talking about earlier about the energy, you're going to be in the energy business. Like the sooner we get this understanding, like that we are now controlling, managing, sharing power, and allowing this power to be used by others as well. Like we're going to be optimizing and getting more financial benefit from any other application we have today. So that's the first step. The second step, I think, is really understanding to start like with a high-level plan, a roadmap, like where are you now, where you want to be? Because many people start saying, oh, we're going to pilot, right? Like, but where you want to be? Because this way is not going to stop. There is a sweet spot about like some vehicles, like last mile vehicles around like 400 kilometers, like pretty much 50% of the market is around like the vans, electric vans that we have readily available. You can already future-proof your facilities to ensure that you're going to have the service upgrades properly, or if you don't have that, how we can be creative with the power that you already have at your facilities to leverage that, like in your pilot phase, but also your future capacity as well. So I think thinking by phases, planning ahead, making sure that like we are a charger vehicle, everything agnostic, like so we pretty much like work with everything, but it doesn't mean that we need to work with everything. There are the recommended things that actually work, the interoperable things, like, and I think being able to fine tune and speak and be like learning and failing forward, like sharing the mistakes, let's say, with the full industry is an excellent way, like for the industry to get that reputation and the confidence as well. So I'd say that start there, get your high-level plan ahead, understand your power, your facility, and then you start like engaging like basically contractors, people that are going to support you in this journey.
That's a good way of putting it, failing forward. So Chris, what is your, stories that you can share that kept you up at night? How have you kind of looked back and been like, okay, this is how we failed forward?
Yeah, I'll have to go through my memory to get just one for right now because there's so many. But, if I had to go back and look at it, and we look at our process and when we started over 3 years ago, and it's a little bit to Gabriela's point, is that our first thing was, this is really sexy. This is it, man. This is great. This is wonderful. We're going to start to electrify. We're going to go out. We're going to change the world type of thing. And so we decided, we're going to go buy some vehicles. But we didn't and I always go back to the concept of plan. And why I say that is because we didn't plan. And we should have. And we should have spent a lot more time going through than we did to plan out where we got to. So we thought it was great. We went out and we bought 25 vehicles. And we expected, they're going to be 6, 8, 9 months of delivery. Well, sure enough, they show up 2 months later. And, we have no place to charge them. So we're sitting on 25 vehicles that batteries likely are about to, to deteriorate. We have to find a way to manage them and take care of them. And so very quickly, then we were scrambling to find out, okay, where can we now put the vehicles? Where can we charge them? We had an initial plan to go and pilot at 3 sites. And it was, I'm not sure if we can go to these 3 sites now because we have to, scramble to put these vehicles in. So then we had to just kind of stop and say, all right, just stop running around. You know what? If these vehicles have to sit, these vehicles have to sit. Let's get back and formulate a very good plan. And so that, that's why I go back to this plan. So then, we started conversations with some third parties, some consultants, some other companies to say, what's the best way to approach this? Where do we have power? How much power do we have? So we went into a lot of data gathering to understand, what our facilities are like, what do we have, what's available, only to find out that most of our buildings are 40 years old, don't have anywhere near enough power. So then we have to take a look at, okay, how are we going to upgrade this? And from that, you learn how much this is going to cost. And then you suddenly realize when that price tag comes in, we have to go back and talk to our board of directors now to make sure we've got the capital to be able to afford this. So a journey we thought was potentially going to be, 8 months to a year has now turned into 3 years. And the concept again of going back to plan is start from the wherever you think the beginning is probably not the beginning. If it's vehicles or infrastructure, or if you're looking at your buildings, no, let's go back and take a look at it. We had Matt up here yesterday. Go back and start taking a look at your data. Understand what you have. Understand, for our perspective, it was our roots, how long they are, what they have, what we have. How are we actually going to put this in place, and what does that look like? And again, we probably tried to jump ahead 2 or 3 steps in terms of trying to get it out, because, man, we thought this will be great. If we can beat UPS out to the punch and have a vehicle out there, man, this will be fantastic. You know what? If we can beat DHL or FedEx, this will be great. And that was, that was probably one of our first mistakes. And we've had many others beyond that. But to sit down and bring other people in, whether it's the utilities, whether it's third-party consultants, and start to talk about what you think your dream is. What is it you want to do? Where do you want to get to? What does that look like? And then start putting the building blocks in place before you ever start buying or jumping out or going too far down the path. Because for us, as I said this yesterday, on our plan, we're probably on our 15th iteration of our plan now, because it's changed in 3 years because of the dynamics of supply chain and utilities and of vehicles, these kinds. It's changed constantly. So I would say, if I could, point something out to all of you, is sit back, take an inventory of what you've got, think of where it is you want to go, and then start laying that down on paper before you pull your checkbook out or before you get too excited about having an electric vehicle on the road.
Okay, so this is where the problem lies, because you want to plan. That's a common theme that we've heard. You got to plan. However, the technology is changing fast. How we generate power is changing quickly. And so things will inevitably change, and you have to have an appetite for risk and to change the plan, to change the operating model. And so, Rob, I want to hear from you, because yesterday at the workshop, clear frustration about how there are barriers in terms of the power generation, the grid capacity issues, but the way in which we receive our power and power our facilities is going to look very different. And at UPS, we call ourselves the united problem solvers. And so we do have an appetite for tackling tough, complex problems. But we now have to quickly become also experts in energy management. So talk to us a little bit about what V2G is, and how is this happening on the ground in BC?
Thank you. And as a delivery businesses, we are really good at that. However, the 7Gens of the world are really good at this new equipment, that planning you're talking about. So I put a shout out to groups like 7Gen, because they know what we never knew, and that's what they're experts in. And they would have, if they'd been around when you were doing that, they would have said, well, hold on, you have to figure out the power first. So, that's why they're here, and that's why they're important. It's way beyond the bench strength of our company to understand these things. We're a small courier business, and then I have a tour bus business. We don't have people that understand this, so there are others who are excited about it. So, vehicle to grid. You'll be hearing in the news that we're not going to have enough power for all these electric vehicles going forward. We have to have more power generation, etc. It's actually probably not true. Probably not true. There was a study done in the UK recently that said by the year 2050, they will need 25 gigawatts more energy just for electric cars. 25 gigawatts more. However, with bidirectional charging, which is out there but you don't have yet really, with bidirectional charging and smart meter management, in the future by 2050 they won't need 25 gigawatts more. They'll need 5 gigawatts less than they produce today. Isn't that astounding? And what that means is, and I've got an example here because I'm always trying to make it simple to understand for myself. So this is your bidirectional, call it your bidirectional car battery. This is a big power port I have during the day for when my phone runs low, etc. So it takes all night to fully charge this. It takes all night. It's a big one. And then it takes all week to discharge it. But I discharge it in 30-minute increments when I need it. That's the same thing that we'll be doing with our buses and trucks in the future. And that's why you won't need more power. You'll have power when you need it from these rolling assets. So that's a start. And the last thing I will say, in the States, the Department of Energy has shown $25 billion has been invested, $25 billion to date, in stationary batteries, stationary storage. Okay? And they also show that there's almost 4 times the amount of battery capacity sitting in cars doing nothing 90% of the time. So it's out there, it's available. We just have to be able to get it back. I plug this into the wall at night, and during the day, I turn it around and plug it into my phone, etc. That's what we'll be doing with trucks and buses, and that's why we're now talking to utilities. Did you ever think you'd be having an influence and negotiating with utilities and that they would be coming to you?
You chuckled there, so there has to be something there. Why don't you share?
Well, I think that's probably part of the experience we didn't imagine in terms of having to deal with the utilities on other than just powering our facilities in general for our material handling equipment, our general lighting. But you have to understand now that that as part of that the overall ecosystem, they're a major stakeholder. And when you start down the journey and going into this, and I've said this before, is that the number of stakeholders that are involved in this process are significant. Whether it's the utility, whether it's a third-party company that needs to assist you, or even other functions within your business. The number of people that have to be involved in here to actually make this happen and to get this are significant. And the utility now is becoming a very major player. And as I've said, also before, that the dialogue to get everybody together here now is very important. And we're talking internally about how do we get together, how do we create some our own lobbying group to to reach out to the multiple people across Canada, the multiple utilities across Canada. How do we engage to get larger groups together so that we're all talking about what that power demand looks like, how big is it, what could it be? I think to Robert's point is that we don't necessarily know what that future power demand is. Is it going to be really big? Is it not? How are we going to share it? Who's going to get it? So that dialogue, as we've gone through our journey now, we're seeing it's becoming more and more important with utilities.
Gabriela, why don't you share a little bit about, from your vantage point, conversations that you're having with utilities, and what is keeping you optimistic that we're making progress and we're heading in the right direction and quickly enough to meet our 2030 climate goals?
My experience with utilities in Canada, they are very positive, I think, like in general, because like when I speak with utilities in the US, like it's a different beast, like pretty much. Like we're talking about different types of policies, regulations, things that we have to consider before. But Canada, like shout out also to BC Hydro, Hydro-Quebec, like they're doing a great job. Also, Electra, Hydro One here in Ontario, like, I think they're very much thinking ahead on how they can offer types of incentives, like to support commercial fleet electrification. In BC, we have a lot of projects related to DER systems as well, like so how we can include the microgrid systems, how we can collect that information, because we need to stop thinking utilities in a passive way, let's say, like, and they need to be more proactive as well, like, okay, what can I provide to you as well? What can I support you? And they're already thinking that. They're already making the business cases around that. So it takes time. It's not something that's going to be like, from day to night, like pretty much, like, but I think we are already talking to key stakeholders around that as well. They're very much motivated on that, and in Canada has a very much advantageous point as well. On the tariff side, like on the cost of electricity, I think like in a truck board there, I heard you saying like something that resonated with me around like like people are paying like for the cost of gasoline, like pretty much, and based on the volatility. Like, and right now, like we don't with utilities, like the tariff is like with no volatility on that. Like you don't have to pay for that. So that's pretty much that buys in like on the electrification start right now, pretty much. Like, so I'm very optimistic. Like there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of planning on their end, but also execution, right? Like we don't want to do analysis paralysis pretty much. I'm saying like, oh, we have to develop roadmaps, like we have to plan where the grid is the grid ready, is the not grid ready. Let's bring stakeholders, develop hubs, test it out, and then we continue building. Let's say let's keep this moving and not just stop like in between. So I feel that it's happening, but it's a lot of work to be done as well. So.
And I think the minister's announcement yesterday morning was yet another signal that, you know, there are incentives and positive kind of carrots on the horizon to ensure that this is a feasible and viable option for the future. I'm going to queue up the audience for questions. If you do have questions, please head to the mic. I'm going to lob another question, but just wanted to let you know that for anyone who's interested, just stand behind the mics there. I was debating on whether to ask a policy question because it seems like companies are moving and have the internal motivation, whether it's through their own climate sustainability targets, additional kind of requirements on the ESG side of things. But what would truly unlock and scale this electrification journey for fleets? Chris, do you have one key kind of policy that will unlock and scale electrification for Purolator?
I'm not so sure if it's necessarily a policy, Carolyn, but I think, you know, going back to your comment around incentives and infrastructure, I think for me, if we could get, or we had the governments working on more of the infrastructure and dedicating the incentive to push towards the building of the infrastructure more so than to auto manufacturers or batteries. We can see here that technology is already underway. They're building it, they're getting it, they're making it better, it's growing, it's there, and I think it will grow organically. But I think we need to really take a look at, and as I just call it the foundation, how do we build this foundation? And if we could have more policy push towards building the foundational elements. And when I say foundation, I mean things like, you know, engineers, technicians, schools, not only the hardware and software that goes out there, but building that entire infrastructure that supports electrification. You know, we have to have more people that are actually involved and dedicated. And I think, you know, we're seeing, you know, here and at other shows, we're seeing, you know, a growing number of people involved. But I mean, we have to take that leapfrog growth, and I think that has to come from building more of the foundation. Yeah, you know, you hear all the time about, you know, chargers that don't work on the road or that are broken or that people have set them up and they haven't maintained them. These kinds of things. Well, in order for this to happen, especially for the smaller and medium-sized fleets, and I'm just speaking on the commercial side, you know, they require more support because they don't necessarily have the capital that, you know, our organizations have. So we need to be a little more, you know, I said this before, you know, socialistic around creating infrastructure for EVs. And I think from a policy perspective, the governments can support that more and push the dollars more towards there. I think, you know, high tide will float all boats.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that comment. Okay, why don't we go to the audience member here?
It's Kevin from Guelph.
Attaboy.
We touched on the importance of planning for charging infrastructure and delivering the right power, but I'm curious for delivery fleets, UPS, Purolator, Novex, after you have infrastructure, after you have vehicles deployed, thinking about the daily operation of the electric vehicles, what are the challenges there? When the vehicles are not charged and ready for their next job, why not? What are the challenges in getting those vehicles charged and ready on a daily basis?
So I can tell you, like from our perspective, is again going back to the whole planning discussion. We spend a lot of time with our operations planning this out in terms of, okay, once we put an electric vehicle in there, well, now what's going to happen? What are you going to do with it? How is it going to move? What are the internal logistics around managing a vehicle that's inside a terminal? How do we, how do we back them up? How do we make sure that our drivers know how to back them up? How do we hang our gantries to make sure that they're effectively hung inside the facility to make sure we're plugging the ports in effectively? So we spent an inordinate amount of time with our operations long before we ever put the vehicles in place, so that we could avoid a lot of these things. We run, probably similar to the US, we run our vehicles in waves. So we'll have a wave that leaves at 8 o'clock in the morning. We'll have another wave that leaves at 10 o'clock in the morning. So how do you get those 10 o'clock in the morning vehicles charged if you don't have enough chargers? So we've had to work on charging patterns. We've had to work on rotational charging. And in our case, we've actually had to add staff to be able to, who are going to actually plug the vehicles in, who are going to shunt the vehicles around and manage it. So we've had to think about these things in advance, because the last thing we wanted to do was bring a vehicle in and then disrupt the operation, or have a route that wasn't being run, or have a vehicle that was down. We have to have a significant uptime. We have to have over 96% uptime of our vehicles, the ones that are that are involved for maintenance. So it's important that we manage and understood the logistics inside our building and around the outside of our building, and make sure we trained not only the couriers how to drive, which is an important piece, but the operations in general, how to manage the vehicles.
Just want to add one thing. Plan for contingency as well, and redundancy. So when you're thinking about like you're dealing with a new technology, these things although they're very reliable, like they may fail. When they fail, what do you do, right? So making sure that you're planning for redundancy when you're actually planning for that. Be comfortable with the level of uptime. Yeah, also you need for your vehicles. And just ensure that you understand your operations pretty much, and know exactly what he's saying, the sorting, what time you're sorting, what time you're departing, what time you're going back. And lastly, your contingency plan on the road. And one thing I want to just touch base is around the public charging, right? Although most last mile vehicles, they are charging overnight, you don't need that power. Sometimes it's just good to know what in your route, what is, that gives confidence on the driver's side as well, just ensure that you can top up, go back, and you don't need to charge all, from 20% to 80% pretty much every night. So that's just some food for thought, let's say.
I'll just, yeah, those things happen, and I would say the other side, our two 48 passenger buses we've had for 5 years charge in 3.5 hours, and they go 300 kilometers. And Geotab reports that 70% of MHDV vehicles returning to base have only used 30% of their battery. So in some ways, it's also really easy.
We're still early days, but we're monitoring the performance of each of our vehicles on the road, and certainly operational continuity, reliability is number one, and I'm sure that's true for Purolator. Being able to ensure that each vehicle can do its route, and typically each package car that UPS has, travels around 170 to 250 kilometers a day. It's the same driver, the same vehicle doing, their typical route. And so that's how you kind of build the familiarity of the driver and the vehicle and the community that we serve. So, I just want to echo Chris's comments on being able to consider the reliability of the vehicle. Over to you.
Yeah. Question, or it's a statement, first of all. Dave Arkell, 360 Energy. So we have been involved in the last 3 years studying the electrical market for heavy transport. So these transport trucks are typically 800 kilowatts to 1 megawatt load. Just in Ontario, if all trucks went to electrical, it would be a capacity load of 8,000 megawatts. Our peak in the province is 22,000 megawatts. So I'm not suggesting that all the heavy transport will go that way, but what I want to convey, and I'm asking the people up front here, is, and I'm formerly, many years ago, from a utility, and I understand why some people may smile when they hear about utilities. They will not move the pace that will need to happen. So my question to the audience, or not the audience, the members there, have you started to think of other options? Have you started to look at distributed energy resources as another option, just in case the utilities will not be able to meet your expectations, whether it's at certain times or in certain regions? That's my question.
Thank you. And if they don't move, they're not going to be dominant in the power business in the future, actually. And for example, there was a call for power in British Columbia recently, and one of the segments was they wanted 500 megawatts of stationary storage, battery electric stationary storage. And I've proposed, I said, well, half of that, 1,000 buses, large buses, would give you 250 megawatts of rolling storage. It's a new term, maybe battery electric rolling storage. So you're absolutely right. There will be other power players coming forward if the utilities aren't willing to move forward. And one thing I would put forward is that today a charger is a cost. Charger cost, infrastructure, everything is a cost. A bidirectional charger in the future is an investment. In other words, the utilities can have tremendous cost avoidance. The project we're doing with 40 buses with BC Hydro will save BC Hydro $200 million. So I hope they're going to wake up.
I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up the session. It's an investment into the business, into our community, and just 5 seconds each person. If you were to say a few words to motivate the audience on their journey, what would you say? Over to you.
I'll repeat the message. I've said it every time I have the opportunity to talk, is that electrification works. Our routes are running. We run them every day. Our vehicles go out, they come back, still have charge in them. They're extremely reliable. We haven't had, I think we've had one breakdown so far of a vehicle, which was a one battery issue. We simply replaced the battery. But I can tell you that, if you're going on this journey, I would say take your time, measure it out, go forward. I think, Dave's point there in terms of, power generation, what's available on power is a concern. So you have to kind of measure how you're going to go forward. But this works. We're saving money, and we're making people happy.
Okay, 5 seconds or less. Over to you.
Oh my, no pressure. No, I think it's, I would just say this quote that I heard from one of our clients, pretty much like one of the drivers saying, like, if I have to go back to ICE vehicles, I quit. Like, that's it. Like, there's no way back, like, to that. So I would just leave it with that.
The winners will think different. There's a disruption going on. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. Why don't we give a warm thank you to our panelists.